Chair, we're now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Resident Services Select Committee. My name is Councillor Bridges and I'm Chairman of this meeting. Key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you'll be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. And for those in the public gallery, you will not be on camera. A reminder to councillors, officers and those speaking today, you should turn the microphone button on when speaking. This will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. Some quick housekeeping rules before we go on to the main agenda. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening. However, if one sounds, please follow the officers to the fire exits out of the building to the designated meeting point, which is the Civic Centre forecourt. Mobile devices to be placed on silent or switched off. And we also have residents' feedback forms in the room and also underneath the broadcast. Our main agenda item, so we go on to item 1, apologies for absence, please.
We have received apologies from Councillor Core with Councillor Bowles substituting this evening.
Thank you very much and a warm welcome to you, Councillor Bowles. Item 2, declaration of interest in matters coming before this meeting. Councillor Bowles.
Just to let you know, I'm on the management board of Citizens Advice, Hillingdon.
Thank you very much. Item 3, to receive the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 12. Are there any points to raise? Can we agree them as correct?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in part 1. There are no part 2 items to be discussed this evening, which brings us on to our next item, which is the review of the homelessness and customer journey, witness session 5, pages 13 to 22. This evening we have for this review Dan Kennedy, the Corporate Director for Services, Melissa Blower, Housing Improvement Programme Manager, and we're delighted to be joined by members of the Citizens Advice Bureau. Good evening, Jazz and Joanna. So Dan and Melissa, perhaps I could start with you to introduce the report and then we'll go on to our witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to confirm, this is our ongoing review of the customer journey within the homelessness and housing needs pathway, and we very much welcome our colleagues from Citizen Advice who will actually be providing sort of their own positional witness statement today. So without further ado, I'll hand over and invite them to comment.
If you could use your microphone button, please. Thank you.
My name is Jazz Negra. I'm from Citizens Advice Bureau. I've been with the service for 12 years. I'm Joanna. I have been working as an advisor for over 20 years, and for past 2 years I have been leading on a housing advice project funded by the Nationwide. This project has now completed, and I have been invited today to give our kind of feedback or comments on housing advice provision.
Would you like to give an overview of the service for Hillingdon residents? Thank you.
Right, so we don't have a specific project now to provide housing advice. Housing advice is now coming under our core services. We are looking very intensively for a funder to provide housing advice because this is one of our highest demand in a borough. As a housing advisor, I have assisted a couple of hundreds of clients. I have not prepared statistics because statistics are not going to tell us anything we don't know. There's a huge demand and there's very little to provide to clients. So these are my immediate kind of feedback points. The housing officers and housing service is very good at managing expectations. Every message, messaging general, and emails to clients are very good in telling the clients it is very hard to find accommodation, it's going to take time, you need to look for it yourself. So this messaging, this managing expectations is done very well. The housing officers are very knowledgeable. They are, or have been, very hard to contact, I presume because of the overwhelming caseload. So my clients used to come to me, well, I've emailed a couple of times, haven't heard anything back. But once there is a contact with housing officer, they are very knowledgeable, experienced, and they provide good quality level of advice. When things go wrong, they go wrong spectacularly, and there is entrenchment, defensiveness, and the higher you go, the less expert advice or response I get. So, over 2 years, I have submitted perhaps 20 complaints to the housing service. None of them were successful. Statistically, it is pretty impossible, especially if some of those complaints were supported not just on my own mere knowledge as a citizens advisor, but by in-depth legal advice, who are telling us, no, this has gone wrong, you've got to put it right. So it is statistically impossible that housing services got everything right, yet none of my complaints were successful. And the higher I went in the complaints process, the less expert and knowledgeable were the responses. So, for an average everyday client, service provides probably a very good level of advice and help and assistance, but in a probably smaller percentage of clients, things go wrong and there is no chance of cooperative, responsive engagement. I don't know why. Perhaps I rubbed people the wrong way, but I can give you an example of a complaint which got to stage 2, and now we have to move on to the housing ombudsman. And the provision is, if I'm not successful with the complaint at the level within the local authority, I have to move on to either local government or housing ombudsman. Currently, ombudsman cases processing times are 12 months, so they are complete chocolate teapot. They are not used to our residents because either by then they have suffered some unacceptable condition for 12 months, or they have moved on. The local authority has not learned a lesson. There is no accountability. There's no responsiveness. So, for example, I have a client who has submitted housing application. We have notified the local authority. The client has got memory problem, dementia. The local authority closed the application because they emailed the client, they gave him 24 hours to submit some evidence, and the client didn't check the email. Not everyone checks the email every day. 24 hours later, the application was closed. the bitter thing about it is the local authority closed it because apparently client did not provide evidence. Well, we did, because I had the email evidence providing. So stage 2 response was, yes, but the evidence you provided didn't have a date of birth and a photo. Well, we provided passport and driving license, again, for email to prove it. So this is the level of simple issues. I am not arguing here complex legal concepts that this client is eligible to housing assistance, but simple things. And that's why I have not had a successful outcome to my complaint for over 2 years, because there is a kind of entrenched defensive attitude, approach. Hopefully will change. I want to say all with a certain provision. As a citizens advice advisor, I only see people for whom things went wrong. No one comes to say, hi Joanna, I wanted to tell you that I got fantastic service from the housing services. So I can only see the bad and the sad and the unacceptable. So my view is probably a little bit skewed. However, there is a serious problem when things go wrong. There is no cooperation to resolve it. Thank you.
Joanna and Jazz, thank you very much for that honest and straightforward feedback. It's very useful to the committee, I think. We'll start with members' questions, and we'll begin with Councillor Gardner.
Thank you for that honest opinion. It's much appreciated. I deal with your agency quite a lot because I refer, well, sorry, you're nodding your head from, not her again. No, I mean, I do refer lots of people.
Yes, you are our greatest, one of the greatest advocates, yes.
Well, no, I mean, I just that there's a limit to my knowledge, although I've got quite a lot of knowledge on housing, and so I tend to go to yourselves because you can I don't know, you can get down to the nitty gritty. I mean, as councillors, there's a limit to what we can get. We get bog standard responses from the housing officers because that's what they do for councillors, you know. But I rely on your stuff. What I was going to say, that's sort of slightly related, but not. I'm really annoyed that you haven't got an office in Hayes anymore. Simply because, I mean, you probably remember me, I was in the one-stop shop as well. We were doing that.
Of course, yes. We used to bump into each other very often.
Don't say anything else.
Okay.
No, but the bottom line is we are dealing with housing cases in Hayes. I mean, Mr. Kennedy will tell you I'm constantly giving things to him, but I would really appreciate if you could somehow, I don't know how, wangle getting back into the one-stop or having a base in Hayes, because it would make life a lot easier. And you're about to comment, Jazz, aren't you? So I'll stop now.
Okay. Now, I was just going to say we are fighting for an office in Hayes, and the office is still empty. We'd love to go there, but we're being told that that's not accessible to us. So we very much like our presence in Hayes. It's much needed area of the wards in the borough. So if anybody can help us be housed there, we'd love to.
Councillor, would you like an additional question before we move on?
It's not a question really, but I know quite a lot of people in the community and I'll have a nose around.
Thank you.
Councillor Gohill.
Yes. Thank you for your honest presentation. It's really good to hear what you're going through. Just before I ask my main question, I've got a slight mini point of clarification, if you can. When you say your complaints, is it complaints to the Hillingdon Housing Department, or is it to the Ombudsman?
No. To the Hillingdon Housing Department through the standard local authorities complaint procedures. There are 3 informal, stage 1 and stage 2. very often is quickly bumped up to stage 1. The triage complaints officer will kind of do that, and then you move on to the ombudsman. And this is where things go into a big black hole and don't reappear for a year or so.
I understand. I suppose my question is, it was what is probably your primary barriers, but you've just mentioned that. Would you say that is your primary barrier you encounter when trying to help residents under the current framework, or is there anything else that you said would you say is your biggest issue? And I suppose the second part of that is how might we as the council revise our policy to remove these obstacles, or what better can we do to help you from your opinion?
The primary barrier is not how the complaints are treated or resolved or not resolved. It's managing expectations. I'm afraid we in the bubble know how bad is the situation, and a lay member of public have no idea. They are still based on a myth that next door family, got accommodation straight away. So we have a serious kind of battle on our hand to spread this information, but there's many people who don't need it. So how to do it is above my pay grade. So yeah, managing expectations, things will take time.
Councillor Gohill, would you like to use your supplementary? No? Any other members? No? Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for coming and seeing us today. It's appreciated. You're our fifth witness session attendees. We've heard a lot of discontent about how things have worked or how they are working. I'd like to go back to the treatment that your clients are receiving. One of the things that's been a common theme over these sessions has been around the interaction with council officers. So you've mentioned communication, which has come up before. It's been difficult or non-existent in cases, and sort of gatekeeping, but also thinking about empathy and how people are relating to residents, and particularly when you're talking about setting expectations. Do you have any experience or any information that you're aware of when it comes to the interaction between clients and the officers?
Okay, in your initial question you said interactions with councillors, but you meant housing officers.
So council officers, so yes.
The housing advice?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have a particular, there's no particular kind of way. Some people are very happy, some people are not happy because there's no responses, or the housing officer is telling them, look, you've got to also make your own effort, make your own moves. So I cannot say that I'm bringing you here a portfolio that shows that the housing advisors are not empathetic or rude or not knowledgeable. No, it really sometimes depends on the person. When I see a certain name in an email signature, I know I'm going to get a very good service, there's going to be very, good exchange. And, also, when it comes to councillors, when I am asking councillors for help, I'm afraid I'm getting answers only from Janet, because I have sent a couple of emails to councillors for my clients' wards, and there's completely no answer. So even though my clients are not in Janet's ward, I'm afraid sometimes I load it up on you, and you act, very quickly. Because there is a problem with the new application process. the homelessness application process, formerly called Jigsaw, I don't know what it's called now, it is a strange beast. One is it is closed, even though completely without any client's fault, it cannot be reopened or reinstated. So client has to make new application. That involves uploading quite a lot of information and evidence. Some of my clients struggle with that. The client of who I kind of gave example earlier, the application was closed because he did not provide evidence, we did, whatever. But I've been told at various stages of the complaint, the application cannot be opened. One is closed, it cannot be opened. Well, it is useless then. It is not fit for purpose. And, you know, why? Is it all deleted? Does it all disappear from the system? It gives the clients an enormous amount of headache. People are sometimes not very digitally capable. It creates a backlog for us because we have to do this for the client instead of helping someone, you know, who can do something for themselves. So yeah, the homelessness application is. You need to see. I wrote to you, Janet, about it, and I explained this is not fit for purpose. Thank you.
Councillor Farley, do you have a follow-up?
No, thanks, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. And Joanna, lovely to see you after 2 years. And Chair, I should just declare that Joanna and I worked together many years ago at the Union of Brunel Students. Fond memories. 2 questions, really. One is around... One of the concerns I get, I don't actually get a large amount of housing cases to the scale that some of my colleagues get, but the ones that I do get, sometimes people are looking for ways around the system. For example, I persuaded someone the other day not to present as homeless and to give up where they were in an attempt to change the band they were on or the property they're in. What advice do you give them when they come up with potentially ways around the system that may end up impacting them more negatively? And I guess the other point that I took was the one where councillors aren't responding. I personally wouldn't dare not respond to an email from you, but I do think it's important that we do, and would it be a suggestion that maybe we provide the Citizens Advice Bureau with the 2 chief whips contact details, so that if councillors aren't contacting you, you can contact our chief whips and they can question our colleagues as to why they may not be responding to you in an appropriate way. So at least you have an avenue from this evening that helps you. But it's more around the advice you give to residents when they might be thinking of ways around the system that actually may end up having a negative impact on them. And I use the example of presenting as homeless in an attempt to get a different property or to move band.
Okay, without getting into detailed advice, for example, how making an application for housing register would impact on their homelessness or application vice versa, because sometimes they can cancel each other, basically. Working around the system is fine, providing it's legal and acceptable, okay? So if I have a client who has various options, this is my job, obviously, to advise them on the option. We know that if someone is on band C or D, they have no chance in hell to get accommodation within reasonable periods of time. So, if they are in the meantime living in a not acceptable or unaffordable condition, they are entitled to make a homelessness application. But if they make a homelessness application and they are placed somewhere in some accommodation, their housing register application is closed, because that housing application is only made in respect of the accommodation they are in now or circumstances they are, in now. If their circumstances change because they are placed somewhere by the local authority. So housing advice, as you can imagine, is exploring various options, and sometimes the situation is complex. We have very large kind of community of people whose immigration status is complex. There are families with mixed sometimes the immigration status is not immediately kind of easily assessed. So, yes, you need to work around, and I suppose it's the same as is with tax avoidance is illegal, but tax, whatever. Evasion is illegal, avoidance is legal.
Councillor Small?
Yeah, if there were, obviously there's some big picture stuff which, as much as I want this council and this select committee to solve like that, we'll do our best, but we probably won't. If there was 2 or 3 realistic things that you think every single day that is so frustrating, we could easily fix that by just better communications, by a simple change in process that would help your clients. Is there any examples either from you or Jazz, Joanna, that you could give that would be simple, quick wins that we could work together to make the service less complicated or less of a stress for your clients? Okay,
so you're not asking me for a bigger picture. I don't get the bigger picture money. So on my everyday basis would be better communication with housing and services. So perhaps regular meetings or a kind of lively and good relationship, because at the moment the relationship can be a little bit adversary, because they see me as a complainant, as a bringer of bad news. Because once again, there's not many clients who come to us just to say that they are happy. So that relationship is perhaps a little bit fraught. So I would start from that, because if communication is improved and we don't have to kind of end up having to submit a complaint, because that's no one's kind of benefit. And that's where I would start from.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you very much. Councillor Small actually stole my question, so I'm going to think on the hop here. I want to go back to when you said you sent emails over to housing officers, and if you got a response from a signature, you thought some were good and some you didn't. The ones that you don't feel are as effective, shall we say, do you escalate that to anyone?
Yes.
Yeah, and what sort of responses have you received when you escalate maybe this? So I personally have done this myself, so I just wondered what sort of responses you've received.
Okay, I do not escalate on grounds that this person is unhelpful. Okay. I escalate on grounds of this is against the policy, this is against the regulation, this is incorrect information. And so I don't make a personal kind of...
Let me make it easier.
Yeah.
Can I come back on that, Jim? So, how do I word this? The officers that you received the responses from, the ones that are always not within policy and not within procedure, are they the same officers? Or are they potentially different officers every time?
No, I've heard a couple of names who have perhaps left the service because I have not seen the responses, or I have not seen them being allocated as housing officers. Okay. Obviously, I'm not going to share any names, but I don't know if...
So what I'm trying to get at, do you think there's a training need required with the housing officers?
With most housing officers, not.
Okay.
But with people who respond to, let's say, higher stages of complaints.
Okay.
Perhaps there is a need of kind of expertise that is not available to them, or advice.
Okay, I get it, and I know it's really hard to try to say that through here, so I get that. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? No? In which case, Dan, if I could just invite you to perhaps comment and have some observations on what's been discussed this evening, and also if you could check in with Jazz and Joanna after the meeting to check on those complaints and see if there's any live ones which you can intervene on, please.
Thank you, Chair. That's very helpful. And as commented by some of the councillors, none of what we've heard this evening is really sort of brand new. So thank you, Joanna and Jazz, for your time this evening. We will be taking away some of those points, and one of the changes that one of the themes that we've heard is actually a need for a stronger relationship with some of our partners. So one of the changes that I am putting in place fairly quickly is that we need a regular meeting with, in this case, yourself, Joanna, and Jazz, and we will replicate the same with Trinity and other partners that have come to the witness sessions. That means that you've got a space to come to and just talk more generally about cases, but also about the working relationship. So if I can pick up on issues faster, then we will address them as a management team. And we do put in staff who need extra support, or for whom we need to reflect back. And I know Councillor Davies and the Chair have attended and listened to some calls, and we responded and dealt with some issues very, very quickly. So we know we're not perfect. We know things actually do go wrong, and we need to, perhaps I think, an opportunity to have a more open conversation. Because at the moment you're kind of dealing with individual cases, but actually I want more sort of the relationship and more of a reflection with CAB, so that we can build some of the feedback into some of the changes that we're making. It means if I'm picking up issues, I can deal with things quickly. I'm meeting with the team every single week, so that if there are points to come up, then actually what are we doing about this team? And we're also making a point as well of listening to calls, and so we've got our finger closer to the pulse, I think is important. So there are certainly a number of areas to pick up on, and the committee know it's an extremely, extremely challenging environment, but good customer care and good customer experience is important, however difficult it is. And I will pick up on those individual cases.
Thank you, Jan. Joanna and Jazz, is there anything you'd like to say further to what you've already said before we close this item? Just a microphone as well, please. Sorry.
So can I just say, we are currently based in the reception area downstairs, which is not ideal. We can't possibly run a service from that. We are now moving into what used to be our head office, Key House in Useley. It'll work for telephone advice, but we can't see people face to face. And as Janet mentioned earlier, we were in Hayes. It's a lovely office. We're much needed in that area, and we'd love to go and be based there. So if we could, or somebody could help us to have a base in Hayes, we'd really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll certainly pass that feedback on. Thank you very much for your attendance. You may leave if you wish to do so, or you may wish to stay on. It's entirely up to you. But we're now going to go on to the next item. Okay. So, can we stay, or you can stay if you want. Yeah. You're the first person who's wanted to stay, but I just want to stay and listen. Okay. You don't mind. You're more than welcome to. Okay, we're now going to move on to item 6, which is our Safer Hillingdon Partnership Report, pages 23 to 36. This evening we were joined by Richard Webb, the Director of Community Safety and Enforcement, and we also have Chief Inspector Ben Wright, the Metropolitan Police Service. Welcome to you both. Whenever you're ready, please introduce your report and off you go.
Thank you. So I'm not proposing to say too much. I've provided in the report a brief summary of the work of the Community Safety Partnership at the moment, particular focus being on the Making Hayes Safer project, which we've got funding for, and we're seeking to establish as a programme of work to reduce violence in Hayes, which is in support of our statutory serious violence duty and the delivery against our serious violence strategy. Other areas we're focusing on include completing a community safety strategic assessment, and we've developed a new dashboard which gives us a monthly update of crime and associated data, which enables the partnership to have a closer view as to what's changing, what trends and patterns the partnership would want to respond to, and how we will direct the subgroups of the partnership, which I've outlined in the paper as well. We're hoping to use that as assessment in order to develop an overarching community safety strategy, which we're now looking at completing for the beginning of the next financial year. Key component of it is a community safety survey that we're going to be undertaking shortly. We wanted to delay that survey till after the school break to make sure we got as wide a take-up as possible. So we're aiming to launch that survey shortly, which will, for the first time in a while, gauge or give opportunity to residents across the borough and businesses to inform us of what they think the partnership's priorities will be, and that will feed into our strategy, which we're aiming to adopt next year. But I'm aware you probably also, you've had the report from the police and probably want to hear more from the police than myself, as I appear here quite frequently and in contact with you outside of these meetings as well, so I'll hand over to my colleague.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Councillor. So there's a few bits. I know you've all seen and presumably read the report, so I presume just taking you through a few key things, and then we can potentially jump into some questions. So covering off broadly the strategic context / key issues that we've been facing at the moment. A couple of key updates in relation to a new Met for London and where we're going in relation to the plan to reform the Met, essentially. And then some issue, just basically an update on local performance and the sort of activities that we're sort of seeking to drive in that space. So, in terms of strategic matters, obviously over the course of the summer in the broader context, disorder has been a really significant factor across the United Kingdom. We are fortunate in Hillingdon that actually we haven't seen that manifest on a large scale. We haven't seen it result in widespread issues. There were a couple of isolated incidents. One involved the sort of serious racial abuse of a bus driver. That was promptly dealt with by officers in consultation with key community members, which was fantastic, and that individual promptly arrested and remanded in custody. So the real kind of knock-on effect for us was the supply of resources to the rest of the United Kingdom and the MPS at large, really. So that essentially takes us down to a minimum resourcing level in Hillingdon, whilst those matters are ongoing. And there's also an afterburn effect, whereby obviously people who've been on duty for protracted periods of time on those operations then require recovery and rest and recovery periods. So ultimately that impacts our resourcing is the key point to take away from that. There's a couple of other big issues that are impacting us at the moment, and they're being felt in Hillingdon as well. One is prisoner releases. So that is an ongoing issue. We are seeing people released into the community on releases. We know there is a recidivism aspect to that, and I think the statistics in the United Kingdom are 25% recidivism rate, as in people convicted of a crime within a year of being released from prison. So, that's a factor. We've had people released into our communities, and we are doing what we can to manage those and certainly be aware of their prior history so that we can monitor activity and ultimately seek to intervene where we need to. Court backlogs also remain an issue for us in terms of we have lots of people who are awaiting a court date, awaiting to be, ultimately have their moment, as well as victims, and particularly where we have victims of serious offences, rape, for example, waiting for a protracted period of time to give your evidence is obviously a very unpleasant experience, and then reliving that experience a few years later, horrendous. So all of that impacts our ability to effectively prosecute, and obviously, see speedy justice like we actually did during the period of the riots. And you can see when that actually takes place, you get a swift sort of change in behaviour within your community. So that sort of longer term backlog is and remains an issue for us, and obviously is a focus at a much higher level moving forwards. Israel and Hamas, the conflict that's been going on there, and potentially broadening into Lebanon, as we're seeing in the news at the moment, that has an effect here. I think it's really worthy of noting that our sort of community leaders and religious leaders have been absolutely fantastic in terms of coming together, Jewish leaders, Muslim leaders, with support of the council and police, to essentially work through these issues in a really collaborative way, and that's borne fantastic results. Ultimately, we have had to contribute an awful lot of resources to supporting those communities, understandably, to safeguarding and to ultimately protective security at times of sort of peak demand, and that remains ongoing. Immigration also for us in the sense that we have obviously the disorder and that as a potential driver for disorder, but also the Colnbrook Immigration Centre preparing for Rwanda flights, dealing with the crime that is reported at that Colnbrook Immigration Centre, a lot of it occurring abroad, but also stuff that is alleged against people within that facility, is also a significant drawdown on our time and our energies at the moment. So there's just a few big ticket items that I think it's worth just putting into context so that we understand, some of the how the broader picture impacts Hillingdon. And then, of course, resourcing capacity. You will all know the Met is struggling with recruitment at the moment. The picture had been minus 3,000 posts by March 2025. It's now looking about minus 1,800. So that's obviously improved somewhat. When you read Baroness Casey's report, she references in that report that we were potentially 9,800 posts below where we should be. Add on to that 1,800 vacancies, it presents challenging situations that plays out locally. So that's the sort of broader context in which we're operating at the moment. Against that backdrop, the Commissioner obviously has implemented a new Met for London, and we're trying to drive significant change in the organisation. Some of that has been impacted ultimately by the kind of broader context. It's worth noting there have been some successes though in terms of recruitment of PCSOs, so we're seeing those land on our wards at the moment. They're fantastic. Ultimately it means we can get more people out into the communities, be visible, which is a key ask, improve the information flow. So obviously we're not getting the number of people we want through the door in terms of PCs, but hopefully that will continue to improve. We have landed basically a proactive policing model on the BCU, so a proactive strand who focus on going after high harm offenders, for example, organised criminal groups, and we've seen some success in those spaces as well, particularly around the reduction of motor vehicle crime. Equally, there's more going into efforts such as right care, right person, so referring people to the correct pathway for treatment as opposed to police responding to them, frees up time for us to deal with criminal matters, as well as then significantly bolstering our public protection strand. So the idea is that the public protection strand within West Area, impacting Hillingdon, is fully staffed, and they're the people who investigate ultimately things such as rape, serious sexual offenders, child abuse, and the idea is that out of all of the strands is the one that is prioritised the most for resourcing because of the high harm that it has, understandably. I think we'd all agree on that, on impacting individuals. So that's sort of some big ticket items there. In terms of then looking at where we're at in terms of the sort of broader cultural change, there is a lot of work going on in that space. I think we're still waiting on the Stop and Search Charter to be released, but locally we do significant work, and I'm sure there'll be some questions on this, to make sure that Stop and Search is conducted in a professional manner, which is the key issue with Stop and Search, making sure that it's done right. So there's a lot of work that goes on in that space. More broadly across the Met, there's significant work going on in terms of vetting to make sure the right people are coming in, and we're also looking significantly increase the people ultimately being removed from the organisation for incorrect behaviour. That's gone up by 66% year on year, and there's now significantly more misconduct cases held every month, which means basically maybe somebody's done something that doesn't warrant dismissal, but they're being processed through that sort of internal justice system, if you like, promptly, so that we address the behaviours and make sure it's done right. So there's lots of work going on there, as well as disproportionality in terms of, in terms of the recruits into the police. So actually West Area, which is good, has the highest degree of diversity in any of the kind of London BCUs, which is fantastic, and also, generally speaking, has the highest recruitment from diverse communities. So there's some really good sort of green shoots there, and we're seeing some of the recent cohorts that are coming through being very diverse indeed. So again, not quite where it needs to be, and that will take a lot of time to get to the right place, but some good movement. So I won't keep too long on the broader picture stuff, but that's just a kind of a few of the key sort of changes that are coming along. The estate strategy is one that always comes up as a local issue in terms of what is happening with police stations in Hillingdon. The reality is that is sitting at a level that is far above me in terms of, at a political level ultimately, in terms of whether it can be funded and how that would be funded. So that's a conversation that I essentially wait to be told where we're heading. And of course, when I know that, I will be inevitably sharing it with Richard and partners as well. So, and there's a lot of other work that's then gone on off the back of that, sort of fixing the foundations and trying to make the Met work better, improving the fleet availability, feel bits like that. In terms of local performance, where are we at, and what are we sort of seeing in terms of crime trends? Burglary year on year is about the same as it has, so that's kind of trending in the same place this year. Theft from motor vehicle and theft of motor vehicle. We saw a significant spate. Certainly when about a year ago, we first started looking at this issue with real focus. There was about 280 offences a month in relation to theft from motor vehicles. Significant volume of those was theft from the back of vans, people drilling the back of tradesmen's vans. lost tradesperson's van, sorry. So that's actually something that we've seen a significant reduction. So this month we've seen 130 odd offences compared to 280, which is where it was sort of sitting on average a year ago. Significant movement there. The homicide rate is down 75% this year. The numbers were always very low anyway. Last year there was 4, this year has been 1. Violence against women and girls remains a focus for us. Of course it does. You've seen in the news, no doubt, the increases that you're seeing on the transport systems. That is replicated here. And if it was one area of concern for me in terms of where we are seeing violence against women and girls at the moment, it would be on particularly buses. Obviously, the British Transport Police manage the trains. You'll see statistics in our kind of included in Hillingdon for violence against women and girls that come from Colnbrook. Some of those have occurred abroad, which can sometimes muddy the kind of statistics for Hillingdon, as well as including things that happen in the Heathrow footprint in kind of the numbers for Hillingdon, which can confuse matters. But the area of focus really for us in an operational sense is making sure that we enhance the security on those buses in partnership with TfL, in partnership with Safer Transport, schools and some other mediums as well. Robbery is broadly, again, the same as it has been the prior year. There's a lot of work going on around that at the moment, particularly in the release of the iPhone and that being a driver for increasing robberies. DPD vans having things stolen at the back of them. Actually, we see the lowest level of that in Hillingdon compared to anywhere else in the MPS at the moment due to a lot of preventative work that we're doing. So that's good, but we need to keep on top of it. I think, yeah, they're probably the key things. And again, knife crime, we've seen a reduction in that space as well. So they're the sort of broad strokes, as it were, and I won't talk too much more at you because I know that can, certainly put me to sleep listening to me. So, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chief Inspector Wright. We'll start with our first question from Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I could ask questions all day on this, but I won't. First big one for me is on the neighbourhood section. I must say that my own ward has got some excellent ward officers at the moment. I understand that there's a big focus on neighbourhood policing, but I understand that the Met is actually getting rid of its OWL messaging service.
Sure. So, not the Met.
Is it the Met? Is it the Mayor? Whoever it is, the system is going, and the new system is going to take about 9 months to implement. I've heard through the grapevine. Could you?
So I really welcome the question, and OWL is something that we, particularly Hillingdon, as opposed to other areas of the MPS, use really extensively.
Yeah.
My officers put out in the region of 7 million messages a year going to residents, giving them crime prevention advice, which is fantastic. And I think broadly about a third of homes are on OWL, which is brilliant. So of course it causes me concerns that have been highlighted, as they have been highlighted through our Neighbourhood Watch colleagues and partners within the council. The Met is looking at an alternative system to that. Nationally, Neighbourhood Watch uses one system, the Met is the outlier. There are obviously commercial conversations going on around what that new solution might be, and the decisions around funding are very much MOPAC-led as opposed to it being a decision by me and the local team, for example. I suppose the key thing there is what I want to do, and I've already spoken to my Neighbourhood Watch colleagues and Mark and Richard and the council, is what we can do locally is to make sure that we manage the transition as best we can in terms of, carrying as many members across to whatever new system that it is, making sure that we communicate effectively about how to do that, and then, moving towards that solution. There may be a dip in service for a period of time. We can mitigate that in some ways using Twitter and sort of directing people towards that portal, that sort of digital portal. Not to say that it's ideal.
Yeah.
But ultimately, my view is that we want to have something else up and running as soon as we can, of course.
Okay.
Councillor Davis, you follow up?
I have a completely another question, which I'm hopefully I can do. Every year we have the same thing where resources are shifted. What preparation does the Met put in, or the Hillingdon officers? So let's use Notting Hill Carnival, for example. My ward lost pretty much all of its ward officers, and I believe our response officers went down to a minimum level over that period. What resources do we put in as Hillingdon to ensure that our residents are safe? Do we pre-plan? How do we pre-plan for this? That's maybe what I'm looking at.
Yeah, any significant abstraction of resources for a centrally driven event, protests in relation to everything going in the Middle East, Notting Hill Carnival is managed by somebody called MO6, which is basically our significant resourcing department that manages the drawdown. So they do a significant amount of analysis. And I mean, things like Carnival are planned, the planning for next year will be starting now, which we've seen in the news. They essentially manage that resourcing picture across the entirety of the MPS. So, what does that look like in terms of residual resources at Hillingdon? What does it look like in terms of firearms capability across the Met, public order capabilities? They have to look at the entire piece and balance a very complex equation. So, they absolutely do everything that they can. The reality is, we are in a really difficult position in terms of, demand has increased exponentially, call volumes have increased exponentially, the population of London has increased significantly, demands in terms of central protest have gone up, as we have all seen, and the complexity of policing those has increased significantly, and the headcount's gone down, and the posts haven't gone up either. So it's a very difficult circle to square. What I can say locally we do is we just make sure that the piece for us is making sure that we look after people as well as they can when they come back from that central aid, is what we call it. Make sure that they're well recovered, make sure they get the support from their leadership teams, make sure that we sustain minimum staffing levels on our response teams so that we always get to those 999 calls and the urgent calls, which we do, and we have sustained our I-call delivery, which is when you phone up and you need us there in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We've sustained that level of service, but it's not ideal. Of course it's not.
Thank you.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. And thank you for touching on the absolutely shambolic decision this recent government's made in releasing early offenders back into society with minimal notice to the Met Office or local authorities to deal with it. My question is, how does the current safety strategy deal with the sudden influx of early released offenders, and how does that? Are there any proposed changes to enhance enforcement and safety measures put into place, especially in relation to the priorities set out on page 25?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you've had difficult conversations with probation as well, no doubt, around how they manage that kind of increased burden without additional resource, and. I mean, look, the reality is the majority of people that are released don't reoffend, certainly not convicted of reoffending within the first year, though statistically a proportion of them do. We are constantly managing, ultimately repeat offenders, and that's not a new phenomenon, and the way in which we go about doing it isn't new either. Ultimately, the way that policing works and has to work because of volume at the moment is everything is intelligence-led, data-driven. So, in Hillingdon, the creation of my new role, ultimately by the Commissioner, the idea is that me, my boss Pete, and the local teams are aware of the crimes that are occurring on our patch, and we have the kind of, certainly my inspectors, the detailed local knowledge of what is going on, and what my ask of them is to understand the people that are being released into their communities, and when they are monitoring those crime patterns, they're being cognizant of those people that have been released, and are, do we need to take that? Are there indicators that they're reoffending ultimately? So, we are certainly cognizant of it. We're very alive to it, and we are absolutely doing what we can. Equally, we're in a difficult situation, and it is another demand at a time when we are already stretched.
Councillor Gohill, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I do. Just before I ask the second question, I just want to say, to be fair, police do a very good job with, especially with their intelligence. I know from my local safety neighbourhood teams, they rely on their intelligence a lot, and it allows them to crack down significantly. But 25% is, I think, the number you said, of people who reoffend in the first year after being released is still a significant increase. My second question is kind of a new phenomenon that seems to be happening. By new, I mean the last 6 months or so, and that's certain individuals on e-bikes who seem to come up behind you and nick your gadgets. Sorry, that's not a very special phrase. Still your items. And I just wanted to ask what's being done about that, because often they come in pairs. I've seen, and it seems to be a particular issue in my ward up and down Cowley High Road, where people speed up on often modified bikes that go up to about 40 miles per hour. Suddenly speed up behind someone, pinch their phone off them, and go off and it happens within the blink of an eye and there's nothing they can do about them. I just wanted to ask what's being done to look into that specific thing, because it's becoming a big problem, not just in London but in Hillingdon as well.
No, thank you. So again, I mean, I read every crime report that comes in to Hillingdon every single day, and we had a spree. You're absolutely correct to say that of yeah, I mean, how do you describe it? Electrical bikes, essentially, high-powered ones, and a gang essentially that was involved, a group of people that were involved in perpetrating those. There was some really fantastic work that's been done around that a gang that was responsible for a significant spree. And all those individuals were ultimately arrested, remanded, and put before the court. So that's not to say that there aren't other more sort of sporadic issues, but I'm not seeing that as an issue in terms of robbery at the moment, or a significant driver for in Hillingdon. Not discounting the fact, as you say, that might be a broader issue. It certainly is present in the media, which does amplify that sort of effect across the Met more broadly. We obviously keep an eye out for that. But there has been some good work done in that space. My concern at the moment is iPhones and the kind of release of that new technology and people being careful with that. And we're certainly doing a lot of work with schools at the moment to make sure that people are educated and just made aware of the risk of kind of walking around with that expensive device and having that on show, because it does open you up to potentially having it stolen. So,
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief Inspector, for coming again and presenting to us. I have full confidence in the police throughout Hillingdon to deliver very much on high level, like 999, real emergency crime, and also I think they solve some very complicated cases. Where residents speak to me, I'm afraid, on a regular basis, where they don't feel they have confidence in the police, is with low level crime, things like theft. Things like shoplifting, things like antisocial behaviour that goes on. And I continue on a regular basis when I talk to residents. Whilst this low-level crime might seem quite small, it actually, as it builds up, has a massive impact on people's businesses, livelihoods, well-being if it's people making antisocial noise. What work is being done to give residents confidence that when they either win 111 or they ring 999 or they make a complaint about something that may not be as serious as something like murder, but is serious to them, that it is being dealt with? Because at the moment, if I'm being honest with you, the feedback I get generally from residents was, if there was somebody wielding an axe outside my house, someone would be here quite quickly, but if someone shoplifts from the local shop or the local businesses, the police don't really care. And that's just to paraphrase what people are saying.
No, thank you. I mean, that's quite a complex and multifaceted question, but I'll do my best with it. Firstly, I completely recognise what you're saying and the concerns of your residents. You're absolutely right. And look, the police is very much in a position where we have to assess calls to service, intelligence, reports, according to essentially a risk paradigm, and make sure that we triage those things and prioritise safeguarding life and dealing with serious offending, and that's caused due to all the sort of high level factors that we've just been discussing, ultimately in terms of resourcing, pressures, complexities, increased demand. In terms of then how do we respond to that lower level crime, one of the kind of ideas of strongest ever neighbourhoods policing and the reintroduction of the neighbourhood officers is to kind of get back down to that kind of grassroots. This is the ASB, this is the shoplifting, these are the local issues. We've implemented and really sort of taken hold of retail here. So all of my inspectors lead very much a scheme whereby we review the repeat premises and the repeat offenders for shoplifting. And that was kind of a policy change for the Met. We weren't responding to that stuff about a year ago. Now very much we are. And certainly where we have repeat offenders, repeat venues, we work with them ultimately to target operations in those areas. We've recently had a successful one up in Ruislip where we had plainclothes patrols up there because we identified a trend in terms of repeat offenders going into these venues, and then we've proactively deployed to get hold of them and assist security. I think we've also seen a change in terms of shoplifting, of behaviours of security teams. I think they understandably have become very disillusioned with police not responding to those calls and have stopped detaining people themselves. We now very much see more sort of proactive intervention from security teams, for example, at larger stores such as Sainsbury's, as an example, whereby people are detained, police attend and are arresting those offenders. That wouldn't have been happening a year ago necessarily. So there is a more sort of robust stance towards that. It's a big problem. We need retailers and people to support us in that, because we can't be outside of everybody's store all the time. And I think we're seeing a positive steps in that direction, but more can be done. In terms of ASB, and just sort of let's say lower level street offending more generally, and that sort of sense of order that we all like when we walk up and down the high street, me included. It comes down to ultimately we need more people. That's what it really comes down to. We need the people that we have to be available to us, and when they are abstracted all the time, performing duties elsewhere, that makes it difficult to deploy the people that we currently have, and being below strength and arguably below the sort of broader organisational strength that we should have, impacts that. Notwithstanding the fact that I think the teams do some really, really great work. We have some really active ward panels on Hillingdon that we've worked hard to sort of rejuvenate, set in local priorities, that the ward officers then, work to target and reduce. Equally, I don't think this is a policing problem alone. Let's face it, we know that a lot of offending is driven by alcoholism, it's driven by drugs, housing issues, mental health, and all of those services have struggled, frankly, over the last, few years, and that has a knock-on effect. So, there's a broader societal challenge in terms of that kind of how we push forward over the next 5, 10, 15 years and try and get those things into a better place.
Any follow-up?
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you for that very helpful and honest answer. My next question is about communications, and Councillor Davies has slightly this time stolen my thunder by asking about OWL, which I am really concerned about, because the impact that has, especially in my ward of Ruislip, and I know in others, is significant, and residents really rely on it, and it comes back to my answering my own question. It deals with a lot of that low-level stuff. What work do you think you could do more with the councillor and councillors and community groups and residents associations to be able to promote the good work you do? You've just used the example of the one in Ruislip High Street, but the only reason I found out that happened is because I was challenged by residents to say that people in the Barn Hotel had seen a spate in uplift of shoplifting in Ruislip High Street. Well, actually, since they moved in, shoplifting in Ruislip High Street had decreased, which was just a statistic. But I didn't know about that until either I went to the ward panel or found out because I was asking another issue. Is there ways that we can help you and you can help us into being able to promote good news stories? Because the 7 councillors here, 7 of us yet, and Residents Association and others can be mouthpieces for the good work that you're doing. But even as a councillor, I don't always find out those big good news stories when you've been successful, and I want to help you celebrate those and get them out to the community as much as you do. I just wondered if there's a way, anything we can do to help you do that better.
No, I mean, first, that's appreciated. I think I think first and foremost for us, we need simplicity, and actually having whatever the platform is, OWL or another, as the clear reference point, the clear place to which we direct local residents as a collective, is ultimately the place we want to be in. I think we'd all agree, and certainly one of our focuses has been, as in Pete and myself, has been, as daft as this sounds, we've really been trying to make sure the officers are focused on tackling crime. And I really strongly believe, and I was just saying actually to Richard a second ago, I believe in word of mouth, as you've just proved the point there. I think if the police tackle the issues that people actually want them to tackle, and we spend all of our effort and resources in tackling them, then much like a good plumber or a good electrician or whoever else it might be, word spreads. And I think there's a risk of kind of dealing with the smoke and not the fire, and spending too much time on. We could spend all of our time in figuring out different engagement channels. Not to reject your offer, I'm not. So we have to be mindful of where we're focusing our limited efforts. Is the point that I'm badly trying to make. I will certainly take that away, though, Councillor Smallwood, in terms of, I think we will have within, hopefully, as Darren says, Councillor Davies, apologies, within 9 months a new platform which we can use and drive comms towards, and that's sort of a medium-term solution. in the short term, is there a way that we can get some support from yourselves? That's something I'll take away happily. I have a meeting basically with the inspector that I've appointed to kind of manage the transition plan, and we can maybe factor that into some of our thinking.
Councillor Gardner?
Where do I start? First of all, I don't usually make political statements, but the overcrowding in prisons was the result of the last government, as was the cuts in police forces. Right. Now, the problem that I've got is the trust issue with the residents that I represent. They do not. A lot of them do not trust the police for a variety of reasons. I deal with a lot of community groups in Hayes because I look like I am and I get on with everybody, basically. But I'm just trying to work, how are you going to engage properly with the community groups? I think there is a council worker who knows some of the community groups, but not all of them, and it worries me because I end up getting information I then have to pass on. But I don't particularly like being a grass, and also if I haven't seen the incident, how can I say that it's genuine? It's basically that. I mean, you know the problems in Hayes Town. We've got lots and lots of problems. We've got cookering going on, which I've heard about. There's also a protection racket. There's lots of things going on, but nobody is prepared to speak to your officers about it. Come and tell me, but I really don't want to know. Well, no, I do want to know, but I'd rather not be the person that then has to get in contact with other people. So Inspector Lipinski said to me yesterday, Janet, there are other channels you can go through. Well, I've asked people to get in contact with Crime Stoppers. They won't. The reason they won't get in contact with Crime Stoppers is because sometimes you can get a reward. How do they know who you are if you're supposed to be anonymous? There's lots of things like that, and I don't know. I just get very, very frustrated with the fact that I'm acting as a go-between for the police. I don't want to do that. I think the guys in Hayes are doing a really, really good job, and it's very, very difficult. But we've got the chair of the ward panel is doing more work with the CCTV unit here to find out about crimes that have happened, and it's just that I don't know. It's just how are you going to able to make people trust you in different community groups? I know you react with some of the faith groups, but you don't appear to tell them to tell their communities that you're safe to get in contact with. You know, I've got mums whose children have been stopped in the street for no apparent reason, apart from the fact that they happen to be Somali. And of course they go home and say that to their mums. Then, do you follow me? Sorry, I just thought I'd have a quick whinge, but you know what I'm talking about. It's all about trust.
Absolutely. In every relationship is, you know, if you want things to work effectively, trust is key, isn't it? I think firstly, thank you for passing on the information that you do, and I'm aware of the information that you pass on. And I think, you know, you do have a very unique relationship with some people, which is a credit to you. And I don't think necessarily that we could replace some of that. And I think that's down to you being who you are, and that's a great thing. I totally welcome the question. We do huge amounts ultimately around engagement. You know, with what we have. You know, we have a huge reach into schools through our schools officers, likewise into primary schools through our youth engagement officers, which we've retained dedicated people working on that. We also have obviously significant involvement with the faith community from all faiths, which is really, really active. And it's two-way. We do absolutely share crime prevention advice through that. And they feed information back to us. There will always be something that people say you haven't shared with us. You know, we receive in Hillingdon broadly 400 calls to service a day. You know, a lot of information and intelligence flow coming in, lots of crime reports coming in. You know, we simply can't communicate obviously all of that because you never read any of it. So we have to be targeted, and we are trying to do what we can to kind of communicate, particularly by faith leaders and community leaders. The ward panels, I think, are fundamental, and Hayes actually has a fantastic ward panel, which is very active. David Bruff is the chair, but diverse, and has quite a good membership. Likewise, we've worked hard to kind of build those memberships up across the borough, and that's key for the local tasking and the local accountability and oversight. Again, Pete and I put ourselves out there and try and really get out to meet people and speak to people as much as we can. We were down meeting with the hoteliers at Bath Road the other day. around some of the issues there around that we want to sort of drive forward improvements on, and it was a really productive meeting. They were great. You know, we meet with faith leaders on a regular basis. We meet with the IAG, S&Bs. There's a whole host of people and different events that we attend. So we do an awful lot. The challenge and the rub is always you can't spend all your time doing that because you've got to deal with the crime, you've got to deal with the issues. And actually, I think there's a risk of spending too much time doing that, not dealing with the issues and losing trust because you haven't actually responded to somebody effectively in their moment of need. And actually, when we sort of cycle back to Peter's question a second ago, and he was sort of saying about that lower level offending, you know, I think that's a cause of you know, distrust. You know, the fact that we're not able to grip that ASB as well as we would like to. I think if we were able to grip all those crimes and all that ASB and get them through the courts really quickly and get a meaningful piece of justice very quickly for people, we wouldn't have to do as much engagement. And that's the challenge. And for me, it's always about risk. And it's every single day. It's about making sure that what we have is being used to the maximum good, because I can't do everything. So hopefully that answers some of it. But I really agree with you, Councillor Gardner, that the trust is fundamental. I really do, and I'm really grateful to you for feeding the information that you do feed to us. You know, and it makes a difference.
Do you have a question, Councillor Gardner?
Yeah, about the violence against women and girls. You obviously know where I'm coming from on that thing. I still get women contacting me who do not want to contact the police because they don't think they'll be believed. I mean, my thing with the DV is I never ever tell anybody what to do. I give them choices. You know, I mean, I would love to say, call the police and get him removed, but I can't say that because if I say that to somebody and it all goes wrong, then it comes back on me, basically. But that's another thing that you need to get out and speak to a lot of the women's groups, because there are loads of women's groups, but it's got to be done by a male police officer, because one of the groups that I belonged to before, I made the male police officers come in so that the women are not frightened of them, you know, so they know that they can approach a male. But as I say, the violence against women and girls is still going on. I've got several decent people who live in the town who will actually, if they see something going on, they will stop it, basically. They're males of about, sort of, I think, 30 or 40 years old, who will, if there's, because you've got a lot more teenagers beating each other up for no apparent reason, you know. I mean, I saw a girl get slapped round the face by a boyfriend because she answered him back. And I did do the Janet response, and he didn't answer back to me, and he left his girlfriend alone. But there are ways of dealing things with that. It's this trust issue. I'll keep going back to that because I don't want to be a police officer. No way. You know, I mean, I love being a councillor. It's been the greatest 30 years of my life. She says, lying through her teeth. You know, but nevertheless, because of the way I am, people trust me. Because I speak as I find, I have got a foul mouth on me. If anybody has a go at me in the street, I will respond. The fact that I was only beaten up a couple of times in my life is, my partner thinks it's pure by luck, because some of the things I say to people. But it's the trust thing, and it's, as I say, the women I work with in the community groups really feel that nobody cares about them, and a lot of them are beaten up regularly by their husbands because it's normal, apparently, in their particular culture. If I don't give him what he wants, and that includes rape as well, you know, and I have pointed out that rape is actually a crime, a heavy-duty crime. No, not in this particular thing. So I don't know, I feel like I'm walking up and down an escalator all the time. I'd like somebody to bail me out. Don't any of you say anything.
I read all the crime reports. I read everything that occurs in Hillingdon on a daily basis. There's nothing that upsets me more, frankly, than reading the stuff that I read and speak to people about in terms of violence against women and girls, particularly things such as rape and child abuse. It's horrific. You know, I think you've seen the Commission talking about this, many politicians talking about it being a real societal issue that is going to take a lot of effort and a lot of focus from many departments, many different people, people at large, doing what you're talking about there, speaking out and trying to make a difference. It's a really complex thing to sort of to eradicate, and it's absolutely our number one priority. There's no doubt about it. There is a huge amount that we do with what we have to try and tackle the issue. So whether that's effective offender management and making sure that those people who are reported to us for committing these offences are proactively arrested and dealt with. There's something called Operation Soteria that's been implemented in the Met, which is very much based on research and is focused on improving outcome rates for people who report rape and serious sexual offences to police. We're seeing increases since implementing that in detection rates and positive outcomes for really serious offences, and they're quite statistically significant. They're meaningful. And a couple of the sort of key aspects of that are one, focusing on the offender. So there historically has been evidence which suggests, the response to police was actually to almost, get your crystal ball out and question the accuracy of the report that you were receiving from the victim. Whereas now very much it's take that as, take the report and then look at that offender that's been named, investigate them really thoroughly, look at the behaviours, look at the different attributes that you may be concerned about, look at the evidence base, and take a much more intelligent approach to kind of maybe taking some of the pressure off the victims, because it's a very difficult thing to do, to come forward and report that. Equally, the idea is to put more sort of forensic resources into that effort, to put more data and analysis into it, so we understand where it's occurring, when it's occurring, which communities it may be occurring in, how we can target our efforts better. And there's also a lot of work around engagement. So, locally we do an awful lot. You'll know Lisanne Rice, I'm sure. She leads on a lot of that for me. Whether it's be, engaging through faith institutions to help hard-to-reach communities. And we get wonderful support, by the way, from, a variety of different religious institutions. To engaging with schools, to doing walk and talks with people. But I think it's also about just getting the basics of policing right when you're out and about, having a conversation with people, saying hello, building that kind of basic trust. And it also links back, of course, to the broader standards question. We've all seen what's happened with, the horrific cases in the Met of, David Carrick, for example. And, that's so deeply damaging. I've got 2 daughters at home. How would I feel about that my kids reporting something to the police when you see something like that happen? I can understand why people would be concerned about it. But I think the Met has done a huge amount of work to remove people from the organisation and is continuing to do so, and that's absolutely right, as well as stopping bad people getting in. So there's loads of stuff we're trying to push in the right direction. There's more to do, and the broader issue of violence against women and girls is going to take a much more collective effort over a very long period of time to address it.
We are very limited for time, so I'm keen to get as many questions. I'll come back to you afterwards, though. I'm just my point to make. We're very short on time now, because we've got 4 other items to go through. So can I just politely ask that members and the answers are very brief with their questions and the answers provided, please. So I've now got Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with you with regards to the being seen. Definitely, it's something residents care about. Officers out on the beat and being able to be seen, not just going past in a police car. In my ward, we've been doing walkabouts with the officers, the SNT, which is very, very good. So about promotion of that activity is good. There's sort of 2 areas I want to look at quickly. One is the reporting of crime. So the 101 is 101, isn't it? Which is still a barrier to people reporting crime, because they're waiting on for ages and they give up not reporting. The online, I've tried myself, not very good. I tried to report an issue to do with drug dealing, told you to go to the council. So I would urge that there's a review, if that can be fed back to the website, because it's not really fit for purpose, trying to do sort of, as has been said, sort of low level, not the murderous intent type crimes, but these sort of low level things, but you just can't report them. It's sending you here, go and speak to this person. It's not a police matter. Well, drug dealing is not a council matter. It's a criminal activity. So that I would feed back. And then we had an S&T meeting a short while ago, and while they are good for engaging with residents, they do need to be looked at in terms of how they're structured. And I think we've had a conversation before online about locations and setups, but it's also about who's attending them and making sure that people that are there for the right purpose, because we've had people attending that are there to stir up racial hatred and other unpleasantness. So I would see whether or not there's something that can be done, if not already, but to make sure that's firmed up, that we can get the people that should be there, that are there for the right purpose, to speak to the police and deal with police matters, and not go into realms that are not police matters. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Just in relation to the intranet matter, I don't know whether you have a crime reference number or anything you can share with me that would just indicate the specific matter, because it will help. You couldn't report it.
I couldn't. I couldn't do anything to report, because it would say go to the council and do something else.
Okay.
I couldn't get to a point where I could.
Because it's just not something I've had before, but I'll take that away and have a think about it. It's not sort of a widely held view that I've ever received a complaint about before. I accept the fact that the 101 call times can sometimes be delayed when there are periods of very high volume. But there's a huge amount of work that goes into, maximising the efficiency of our command and control centres, and 999 calls generally are answered very, very quickly. And it's very much outside of my realm of control or area of sort of influence. But I'll take the point that you make back to the teams that look at the website and just explain it. Trying to report a matter of drug dealing, you said it was, didn't you? Was very difficult.
Well, yes, but it's what options you pick this option, and it's all like tree diagrams, and it flows to different things. But the options that I was trying to do didn't exist, or just. So
I can absolutely feed that back to them, and it creates a bigger picture. And ultimately, if they've had some other complaints from others, then they can take a look at that. The ward panels, public meetings, generally speaking, I think there's always an element of people with. You almost don't know who's turning up until they've turned up, to a degree, on the basis that these are sort of open public forums, and the idea is that people come forward and discuss the issues. I think we do what we can to remove people who are clearly not displaying the right behaviours from the equation. We've recently had somebody in the Safer Neighbourhood Board who fit that bill very much and is now no longer a membership of that forum. And I would be expecting the sergeants to be doing the same, and the officers in respective individuals on those panels. Certainly if there's any offending, as in racism, etc., then that should be investigated. So I mean, if there's sort of specific issues that you think haven't been dealt with, and you've got like named individuals and specific facts, if you provide them to me afterwards, I'll absolutely have that looked into. That's not a problem. More generally speaking on that, what we've tried to do is a lot of, and coming off the back of broader conversations, is give a lot more training to people around how to run those ward panels effectively, because a lot of the new people haven't had the learning. And again, working with ward panel chairs to help coach them and kind of share knowledge amongst ward panel chairs around how we can collectively do it better. So it's not perfect. That's something we continue to do. We've actually got a meeting tomorrow night as well. So no worries.
Councillor Farley, you have a quick follow-up question? No. Councillor Bowles?
Thank you. Obviously, stop and search is one of the big issues around, and I notice there's various ways you publicise how you're doing it. But I noticed on the youth scrutiny panels, and think about all the youth facilities that have been shut down in the borough. Whereabouts are they being held? And whereabouts are you holding? Whereabouts are you holding these?
So I'll have to speak to one of my inspectors to get the specifics for you, because I don't have those to hand. So I'll come back to you if that's okay.
Okay. And my other question is, as an Uxbridge councillor, I'm going to ask this. Do you find not having a front desk and use of the cells at Uxbridge Police Station is an extra drain on your resources? When somebody is arrested and you need the use of the cells, I understand you have to go to Acton now.
if you arrest somebody in Uxbridge High Street, driving them to Uxbridge Police Station around the corner is a much shorter journey than going to Heathrow, to Fulham, to Acton, to wherever the other cell space availability is. Subsequently sending people to lead the investigation at those sites takes less time if you're only walking downstairs as opposed to getting in the car and driving to different locations across the Met. So, absolutely. Again, it comes down to funding, it comes down to money, it comes down to resources and how many of those suites the organisation can keep open. And it's a sort of strategy that is managed by Met Detention ultimately, a different command in terms of, this is the pieces that we've got to play with and this is how we use them. But you are right to say that it takes longer to travel to those other locations and therefore takes time out of officers' days.
Councillor Davis?
I don't actually have it because Councillor Bells has asked my question. I'm very concerned that we know in a recent by-election and that we were told that the MP for Uxbridge had saved the front desk, and that's not being political, we was told that. So I'm surprised to hear that there isn't no conversation about that front desk being opened, because there was a massive social media campaign on that, and that's not political, that's facts. So thank you, and I won't say no more on that.
Would you like me to save you from being in a tight corner? Right, we'll finish off with Councillor Gardner. You did indicate earlier you had a question. Okay. Chief Inspector Richard, thank you very much for your attendance. It's been very informative, and our thanks to you and your staff for the excellent work you all do. Item 7 is the Statement of Gambling Policy Consultation, pages 37 to 120. Daniel, we're delighted that you're able to join us this evening.
Thank you, Chair.
I know you've had to wait for quite some time, but you may be pleased or not pleased to know there won't be a presentation this evening. If we go straight to members' questions.
Great.
So
Excellent.
I will put it out to questions if there are any. I can see no Councillor Farley, yep.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of issues. Well, whether this is even the right place to put this, but one of the things that concern with certain establishments is the fact that we've got too many of them, so the saturation. Now, whether or not that's part of this document or whether or not that's something for future discussion elsewhere, but I wanted to raise the fact that that is a concern. We've got that, particularly you can use Hayes as a good point. You've got 6 gambling establishments in a very confined area, and on top of that, you've also got 6 pawnbrokers, cash converter type establishments as well. And you have a saturation of certain things. They can, we're trying to promote our high streets. It can actually be have a negative impact. And the other question I've got is around events and such as we've got machines and things like gambling, fun fairs and things like that. We've also got things that fly posting is going up without approval. So these are established things that are going up. That have been consented in certain areas, and then we've got a proliferation of fly posts. I know that's not under your remit. However, there's things that maybe could be potentially added to this to stop that. I don't know, but I'm just putting it out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take the question in 3 parts: the saturation, the events, and the fly posting. In terms of saturation, I'm very, very familiar in terms of the south of the borough which you've mentioned, and you may be aware that we had a recent case in Hayes which actually took this point on. The issue that we have in terms of, well, it's not the issue, in terms of gambling policy in the Gambling Act, we look at the specific, each case on its merits, and I know that seems like a sort of thing that I always say at these meetings, and you would have got legal advice on this in particular cases, in the 2 cases this year, where we have this point. It's each case, on its merits. We look at the licensing and impact and business demand is not unfortunately taken into account. You know, and the honest answer is, could we do more in terms of this policy? And I compare it in terms of licensing act and cumulative impact. Yes, there's potential to put an area in certain areas, but it's proving that there's a problem there in the first place. And my talks with higher senior management and looking at the risk, in particular the areas that you've mentioned that I know far too well, it's proving that there's problems, risks with that. Now, we look at the intelligence and we look at the data, we look at our own inspections, and the reality of it is, in terms of complaints, it's very, very low, if not anything this year, if we compare it to alcohol-related premises. There's antisocial behaviour around the particular areas, but that's dealt with other pieces of legislation. In terms of how we look at the problem or the allegations, is that specific premises. Now, they're tightly governed, as you know, being on the licensing committee, by the Gambling Commission. They already have an operating premises license before it even gets to the application for a premises license. So that factor of looking at, is it a fit and proper organisation to run that check's already gone through. When it comes to us, and that's not like a sort of like an excuse, it's very strong in terms of permitting those specific principles in the gambling, and unless we can show real evidence or real sort of like problems, it's difficult to refuse applications, let alone put in a representation on behalf of the licensing authority and the other responsible authorities. You know, it's pretty much legislation based. In terms of events, I know there's a piece of work that my senior management is looking at in terms of like fun fairs and stuff like that. So we don't specifically govern them in terms of Gambling Act, and same as with fly posting as well, I'm afraid. And that area, I know my head of services looking at that area, but not in terms of like the Gambling Act and the gambling policy.
Any follow-up? Anyone else? Councillor Small?
Chair, thank you very much. And I also serve on the licensing committee and have sort of touched on this here, but I think also it has an impact on residents' lives, so I think it's important. Could you just give us some examples of the work you do to check that the gambling policy is being adhered to, as in when you're doing your checks? And are you comfortable that gambling obviously doesn't just destroy people's lives, it destroys the people around them and families? If somebody was in a gambling establishment in the borough to go to the front desk and go, it's all gone a bit wrong, I need support and help, but do we double check that they have that in place? It's not just the challenge 25, it's also the very serious things that someone might be sat there and have that moment where they realise it's all gone wrong, and that we double check that they would deal with that in an appropriate manner, because they are serious matters.
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. And, you know, that immediately strikes me to the area of enforcement, which, as well as doing the processing, our licensing team deal with enforcement as well. And you'll see there's sections that haven't been updated because we think they're solid in terms of the current policy. We deal with risk-rated inspections, so they're basically, you know, they're scored. If they're high, you know, they're visited every year. If they're low, every sort of like 2 years. And recently we've been doing visits, I believe this year, with the Gambling Commission. So sharing their expertise with us and looking at those checks. One of the major checks for that is self-exclusion and looking at those records. So we specifically look at those self-exclusion records and find out, okay, what the policies, what records are kept at the premises and how are these shared with other businesses to stop, and it's the major thing, vulnerable people, young people coming into it. And what I would say to that is also, in terms of like risk, the Gambling Commission also cover digital online gambling. We at the council deal with just physical sites, so those physical premises, that's what we're involved with. But we do those checks in terms of inspections and proactive inspections.
Any follow-up?
No, thank you.
I can see no other indications for questions. So, Daniel, thank you very much for taking the questions.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
You may leave if you do so. Thank you. Okay, item 8 is the Housing Allocation Policy Consultation draft, pages 121 to 198. Debbie, thank you again for your patience. This, like the one before, will not have a presentation, but we'll go straight to members' questions. Could I have any questions from members, please? Councillor Davis.
On page, thank you, Chairman. On page 122, there's a chart there. Is that including the people that are in temporary housing in the hotels? Because them figures seem extremely low, because I'm assuming that anyone that was in the migrant hotels over the airport, etc., would be included in these figures. So I'm just wondering if that...
Councillor Davis, I can see Dan indicating, I'm not sure.
Sorry. Just to cover that, so all asylum seekers are not the responsibility of the local authorities, the Home Office. So the figures you have are just for those who are actually considered to be a household at risk of homelessness. So when an asylum seeker is granted their asylum claim, leave to remain, that's when they transfer from the Home Office to us. So that, in other words, in summary, the asylum seekers placed in hotels by the Home Office are not included in those figures. They're the responsibility of the Home Office.
Perfect, thank you. I'll leave it there for now, Chairman. Thank you.
Any follow-up now?
Okay, yeah, we'll go for it. Thank you, Chairman. This one's a bit wordy, so bear with me. On page 125, the overcrowding part. So, am I right in saying that if someone's in a 3-bedroom house and they're overcrowded, they can now, part of this new policy, apply for a 2-bedroom property to release some stress? Is that not going to increase the problem on the 2-bedroom estate? So effectively, you've got 1,149 people looking for a 2-bedroom property, and then we've also got 1,151 people looking for a 3-bedroom property, which now means there's 2,300 people that can apply for a 2-bedroom property. So it's putting more stress on that 2-bedroom market, and I would expect that to have a problem going on to a 1-bedroom and vice versa. Do you get what I'm saying? I know it's really wordy, and I'm sorry.
I do understand what you're saying, and I mean, clearly the same number of people are looking for properties on the register, regardless of which they can bid for. But it will mean that those in the 3-bed queue can bid for a 2-bed property. So some of that pressure would transfer to the 2-bed from the 3-bed properties. I mean, obviously that's an issue for those who are looking for a 2-bed property. I guess part of the kind of justification around that is that the kind of higher the number of bedrooms that people are looking for, the less the number of properties that become available. So overall, the pressure on the 3-bed queue is much more than the 2-bed.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Where shall I begin? Can you explain, I'm going to do it in here, what reasonable offer means if people refuse reasonable offers? Because my definition of reasonable may not be yours. Sorry, are you going to argue between which one?
No, that's fine. So reasonable offer means that it's a property that would be considered suitable. So what we would consider an unreasonable refusal would be if it was, I don't know, a first floor flat and somebody had mobility problems, then that wouldn't be a reasonable offer for that person. Or if there was some other medical reason that they couldn't have, for instance, a flat or a house, or there was some sort of reason why the property itself wasn't actually suitable for that person. I guess what we would consider an unreasonable refusal is something like, I don't like the bush that's in the front garden, or some other sort of strange reason that somebody might refuse a property.
Okay, can I do a follow-up? Under welfare grounds, if a person's fleeing domestic abuse, how do you react with somebody who turns up who actually, in actual fact, doesn't want to leave, although they're victim of domestic abuse, but they don't want to leave? But is it immediate that you ask that they have the sanctuary scheme put in place? That's what I worry about, because a lot of people also, well, these days want to stay where they live and want the perpetrator removed, which is, it's a bit risky, but hey ho, it's everybody's choice. But I just wonder how you work out their actual needs when they come and you say, okay, fair enough, you can stay where you are, but what does the but include?
So it's usually based on a risk assessment. So we will risk assess that person. If, again, it seems like it is risky, we'll discuss that with the resident and let them, again, make their own choice as to whether or not they choose to stay there. If they do want to remain within the property, then we will get the referral sent out pretty much straight away to get the measures put in as quickly as possible. And then one of the installers from our supplier will go out and assess what sort of measures should be put on that property to best make it safe.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question based on what the lady from Citizens Advice said. One of the main things they said was about managing expectations. Is there anything that tells people how long they're probably going to have to wait? And is it quite clear on the website? I haven't had a look, so apologies. I just asking that off the bat. That says before you apply, just so you know, the likelihood of you getting a band A is like probably 0.1% or something, or getting onto the system at all is quite difficult, and you should be aware of those expectations beforehand. And a lot of casework that I get is housing related and mainly around housing band related. I can't cope in my current band. I need to be moved up a band, and the reality is there's not really much that can be done just because of the sheer strain. And I do understand that, but do the residents understand it enough? And I think the answer there is no. But what can there be done within our policy to make it a bit clearer to them? I don't think it'll stop the demand, but I think we have a responsibility to let them know equally as well.
Okay, so part of the kind of rationale for the sort of changes in the policy is really about that, trying to give clearer understanding to residents around the kind of realities of the situation and the chances of being rehoused. So that is kind of behind the reason of sort of stretching out the bandings into a far greater number of bandings, so that people can see with a bit more sort of clarity which ones are the top priorities and how much further down they might be in relation to that. And then I think our intention really is to try to really increase the extent to which we kind of publicise information around how many people would be housed or become housed within each of those bands, and how long it takes for that to happen, so that kind of body of knowledge, if you like, sort of builds up rather more than it is at the moment.
Any follow-up? Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Bells?
Thanks so much. Just when someone gets out of borough residents, it's like managing expectations. I've got residents that have been housed out of borough, and they think they're coming back. They still think they're on the list, and they're not. They once they've gone, they're gone. As far as I understand, I've got a few cases where people think they're still on the Hillingdon housing list, although they've taken a residence out of the borough. It's very confusing for people that don't understand this.
It would depend on the tenure as to why somebody's moved out of borough. So if they're moved out of borough and it's a temporary accommodation placement, then they do still retain their residence with us because we're the ones that have placed them out there. If somebody is offered a private rented property and they move into the private rented sector, I believe that's part of our offer letter and decision letter that we issue to people to explain to them that they are removed. But I'm sure we can take it back if that message isn't getting through, that we need to maybe have more of a clear conversation with our residents when we're making that offer, what the implications are for them.
I think sometimes people have to make the decision very quickly for various reasons, particularly if someone's been evicted. And as I say, it's about this managing expectations. So people just genuinely think they're coming back, and I think the ones that I'm dealing with, most of them are been offered permanent residency, a permanent accommodation, but they still think, oh, we're just being put there for the time being. And I think you've got to publicise to people that if you do take it, you're off our list.
Yeah, I think all we can do with that is really to just go back and take a look at our kind of processes and see that see how clear that is being made at the moment, and whether we need to perhaps do a bit more with it.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. I found this quite a heavy read. I don't know about other councillors, but I found this quite a heavy read. And given that's a consultation document, what has the engagement been like with the consultation document so far, is probably my first question. And it does feel just a little bit like moving the deck chairs around. I'm sceptical to be critical of it, because that's not what I'm being. It does feel a little bit like we're just renaming things and calling them something else and hoping it goes away. And I think there is, and I'm being quite broad brush there, because there is elements there, especially one of the very top tier bands being needed. I just wonder if we could start there, and then I do have a follow up.
Okay. I think first of all, it is quite a difficult read. I'd agree with you, and I've tried my very best to make it as simple as I can, and it's not at all easy to do that. I think it is genuinely just quite a sort of complex area. And in terms of sort of moving things around, I guess to some extent what we're doing is we're taking a set number of allocations that we would have during the year and working out who's going to be the priorities for those. And actually, to an extent, it is just saying, well, actually, we need to move this part a bit. And so you are moving those priorities around, but the number of lettings that you've got is the number of lettings that you've got. But I think there are definitely real changes within that policy document. I think certainly the kind of stretching out of bands does bring more clarity. There's a change around groups that we need to sort of move on from different types of accommodation. So, for instance, when we're moving on care leavers and those from social care accommodation and some of the more vulnerable rough sleepers that would be housed in the social sector, those would previously have applied for a Band B, and under the new version, it's the equivalent of a Band A. So that is quite a significant change, and will help us to sort of move people through the accommodation much more than we were able to before. And again, the overcrowding one has already been mentioned, but again, that is, it is quite a significant change to how the register will operate.
Councillor Smallwood?
Look, consultations that the council do at times aren't that sexy, but this is an incredibly important one, and my actual concern is, and I'm going to hazard a guess, having been here for 2.5 years, that we've barely had anybody respond to what is an incredibly important consultation. Now, responding to a consultation is important, but delivering what comes out of the consultation to residents in a way that is understandable and clear is even more. So I wanted to really understand how we are going to communicate for the people that are going through potentially having to get housing, how we're going to communicate these changes to them, which I think is an incredibly important thing, because if somebody is going through this, or this is a stressful thing, reading a long consultation document that is, and I perfectly understand that you can't make these things simple, it's hard enough, but actually the bit we've got to get right, and I want to understand how we're going to get it right, is that we're going to communicate this, manage expectations, but make people understand what the new bands are all about in a way that is simple and clear for residents that are accessing this service.
Okay, apologies, I answered part of your question and forgot the other part halfway through. In terms of how the consultation's going at the moment, I've actually been really surprised at how well it has been responded to. So the online consultation, which is really the main part of it, we've got 241 responses to date. We're also doing sort of consultation between different colleagues and things as well. So we've had a good session with social care around the implications of the policy for them, and we're talking to sort of other members of staff. Things have gone out to various other organisations as well to try to encourage more responses. But yeah, I've actually been really surprised at how well the response has come through. In terms of how we kind of roll it out once the changes to the policy go through, should that be the outcome, then obviously we need to put a lot of effort then into making sure that those changes are understood and communicated, and how we sort of embed that as well.
Just going on the back of Councillor Smallwood's questions, I suppose the first ideal pool of people you would contact for the consultation are the people who are actually on the list, 3,800 odd. Have they all been sent an email or any way of contact, but in the first instance, before we've even gone out to other members of the public to see what they think?
Yeah, we've been going through an exercise to sort of pull together sort of email contacts for that, and there has been a delay with that, to be fair, and we had some difficulty in getting some of that together, but my understanding is that we are able to do that now, so that will certainly be happening, and we'll also invite people to come to talk to us in person as well, not in person, but on the face to face in a group and sort of online stuff if people want to do that as well.
It is getting quite tight for time though on the consultation. If you've got an expiry date of the 13th of October, it doesn't give a lot of people enough time. Is it worth extending it for those people on the list specifically and keeping the deadline the same for anyone else if you've not got round to reaching out to all of them?
I don't think it would make sense to change the deadline for other people. I think if we extended it at all, then it should be it may be as well to just extend it for all. We'll have a look at that and see how it fits. It's kind of fitting it in with other sort of cycles where we need to sort of get it back as well. We'll take a look at that.
Okay. Certainly, I won't speak on behalf of the committee, but certainly for me as an individual on this committee, it would be worth to do that as best practice going forward for anything in consultation with social housing, that you first reach out to the very people who are on it before we even go out to the public in general. That to me would just be best practice in my opinion, but anyway. Councillor Davis?
I've got 3 points and I'll raise them very quickly, but the first one, why are we struggling to find email addresses for these people? They're all registered on Locator. To register on Locator, you need to provide an email address. So I'm very concerned that we're not using data that we've got available. The second point is, part of the change is, are we taking forms offline? Because there is a number of residents that are unable to complete forms online. Have we made these changes? Yes, we have all got smartphones now, we are in that. But has anyone tried to fill out a form on a smartphone? It's very tedious. And the third point, very quickly, sorry Chairman, is have we made allowances, and I'm not being political here, I'm just being realistic, for the prisoners that have been released, if they've been released from prison, they have to return to the borough they lived in before they went into prison. So we should be expecting an influx in these houses. Are we prepared for that? Thank you. Sorry, Chairman.
Just on the latter point, we know exact numbers and phasing, 18 in total for Hillingdon from prison releases, and we're working very closely with probation service to facilitate them. Everyone who leaves prison has an accommodation plan and a pathway, so we know exactly who.
Councillor Farley, sorry, Councillor Small, did you want to come in on one of the points? I think you mentioned something.
Yeah, I apologise.
I
apology, and thank you to Councillor Farley for having to allow it, I guess. I don't think I had my question, or I don't feel like I've got enough information about the communication that's going to happen to residents post the consultation, as in, how are we going to make them understand this, right? It's hard enough to blooming understand, right? I can barely understand the consultation, and I'm reasonably bright, and don't comment, Janet. How are we going to make residents understand this? Is a very, very serious point, and how because this is a change, and any change is difficult.
policy aside, I mean, we've got to have a very clear and legally robust policy, because we'll be taken, you know, to the cleaners, to be frank. And we've looked at a number of policies that are in place in researching and preparing our proposed policy, and obviously looked at, well, what were the challenges we're trying to face. And one of the points that we've picked up on is managing the expectations and breaking out those 4 bands into sub-bands now, and you can see that set out in there, makes it clearer where anyone is in that relative to everyone else. So, and we are putting, and we have information on the website to help manage those expectations. Going forward, that's the thing, we've got to manage expectations. There is not a sufficient supply of affordable social rented housing, and we are moving into the next phase of work in terms of managing the expectations. So what some boroughs do, very few in London, but we are following up on this as part of our engagement and communications plan, is actually putting out, plan is to put out a very short video, but it helps to reset expectations, which says, you know, be in charge of your destiny. You may not get offered accommodation in borough, and it may not be social rented, and but we will work with you to help find accommodation. In respect of the policy, whilst we've got to have a very clear, very legally robust policy, we are going to be working on how we can make it simpler to actually understand and communicate, which means how we structure it, how we reach the different priority bandings, and actually, and importantly, what residents can do if they don't agree with or feel that the priority banding which they've been awarded doesn't reflect the priority that they feel they can have. Because there are exceptions, such as, for example, medical information or exceptions to that policy. So, and I don't pretend it's easy, because it has to be, as I said, legally robust, but it's how you then communicate and engage. And obviously and ultimately, they've got a casework team as well that they can work with, so that they can talk through individually their application, because it is, you know, that when you try and communicate what is quite, and it is a very complex policy, in writing, even that can be dense. So I think sometimes just having the conversation and inviting our residents in and just talking through, because sometimes what residents are not able to convey in their application is their situation, their circumstances. So you do need sometimes to have that communication.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of stuff has been touched upon. Going back to the homelessness prevention pathway that we've been taking the evidence for, one of the things there we discussed and has come up was language, and being referred to as "you're not a priority." So whether or not we're using the word priority could be replaced with something else potentially to, because you look at that. I mean, as Councillor Small was just saying, if this goes through, if you're on band C, you're now down at level 12. It's a bit of a shock that you're now this far down a list, and then you're you're number 12. You don't have priority. So language, I think, is something that should be considered here as well. And then going back to the where are we here? It's page 130, 131, and again touching upon responses. I mean, you've got 224. I mean, I think Debbie then said 241, the latest number. These are not big numbers to come back. Whether any of these people that are on the waiting list, I don't know. But we've got statistics here which I'm not sure are particularly meaningful. Social media posts, so we've got clicks. Well, how do they convert to actually someone completing the survey? It doesn't really give much apart from fine people looking at it, but it's not actually getting any information for people to contribute to what is, as has been said, a very important consultation. How we're getting to people. So beyond what the chair has said, and I agree with him fully on this about reaching out to the people that are on the list, but there's things here about going to resident associations. where other business associations, predominantly they're in areas where, and people that attend them predominantly are people that are not on a homeless waiting list. There's aspects of this about where the council has gone first, rather than, as has been said, those that actually are directly impacted by what this change would actually do. So I concur with that, but I just think there's more that could be done to as has been said, with all our consultations as a council, to get a better response rate. Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, the intention was always to go straight out to people on the register, as we've had a bit of an issue with it. I'm not really sure of the detail of why that is, but there's certainly, the intention has been to go out to those people, and we will make go back and make sure that does happen, and possibly extend the time frame as well if that's possible. In terms of the kind of feedback that's been given in the report, I mean, at the moment that's really only just sort of touching on the kind of headlines of what we've got, and that's because the consultation is only part way through currently, and then once we get to the end of that consultation period, there will be a comprehensive report that pulls together more information about those responses, which will give a lot more sort of detail around what people have said about their satisfaction with various aspects of the consultation. We'll also be able to break that down by people's age and where they live and their ethnicity and various other sort of characteristics as well. In terms of whether people on the register have responded, I would think it's quite likely that a lot of those people are people who are already on the register, but once we get back I will have a look and see how far we can analyse whether they are or not.
Councillor Polly, did I give you a supplementary?
You didn't, but thank you. I think the thing that was sort of also glossed over again was about this issue about access to the internet and paper-based. I don't think that we got a complete answer on that one, because that's something else I've got down, and Councillor Davis has mentioned that. So, what's happening in that area for ensuring that we are able to capture those that are not digitally enabled?
I think some of the communication that's gone out has sort of made the offer of a paper-based version to be available. It may be that it would be worthwhile us doing something more, and I'm not sure whether we've actually taken paper-based ones down into the reception area at the moment or not, to see whether we could encourage more people to complete, but we'll have a look at doing that as well.
Councillor Gorehill.
Thank you, Chair. More a request through you, actually, if possible. I'm really quite concerned about this emails being sent out. I mean, from the 3,896 people in the housing register, if you have 254 people who have responded, that's 6.5% of people on the housing register, which is, when you put it in those terms, is just really, really quite poor. I don't want to come back in November and ask what's gone on and says, and come up with an answer of, we were unable to, so I guess it is what it is. Can we get an update through this committee that these emails have been sent out, perhaps through you, Liz, if that's possible, Chairman?
I'm happy with that proposal. I think it's a straightforward one. Dan?
Just to say, we've still got some sort of about 4 weeks or so to run for the consultation, so it's already in our plan to run what we call sort of spikes within the consultation. So usually, it's going to sound a bit boring now, but usually when you run a consultation you get quite a big flurry at the start and it tails off, and then you have spikes throughout the programme. So we've still got social media spikes planned as well, so that usually you get another sort of spike. And whilst we have gone far and wide with our engagement, we will target those who are on the register and those who are also newly joining the register as well, so that we kind of keep that. So we will. So even though we'll be sending out the emails, we'll be running them as spikes throughout that period as well, so that it will kind of keep it, because as you approach the deadline, it's like, you know, you haven't got long to go now, it's just 1 week to go, and you can kind of do the countdown so that you get a lot more interest. So we will do that, and we'll come back through Liz with the further updates.
Just to clarify, Chair, it's, the update is if the email's been sent to the people on the housing register rather than if people have been contacted at all. And so just making sure everyone's been contacted at least once, ideally more. That would be great. I think it would really help us plan our policy better as well.
Just to confirm, you've noted that, Liz? Yep. Okay. Any other questions? No? Debbie, Dan and Melissa, thank you very much for your attendance this evening and for answering our questions. We'll move on to the forward plan. Agreed, thank you. And item 10, the work programme, also agreed. That concludes the business for this evening. Thank you all for your attendance. The meeting now is closed at 9:05. Thank you all and good night.